how can we begin to embrace AI in a way that helps us to advance our work and doesn't just leave us on the table to be picked apart?
What AI looks like are very powerful tools called language models. And these tools have essentially read the entire internet and gotten really good at understanding the patterns that you see.
What are we worrying about with Doge? Apparently getting access to a lot of information about us as individuals.
Tech companies already have so much information about us, and combining that with what the government has on their side, I think people are right to be worried. AI is being put in front of people in all these kinds of ways that no one's asking for and no one wants. I think about it a lot like the coming of the next internet. The future of where it's going to go is not set in stone. This is not written down. It's not already determined.
It's not a scam then.
My current stance right now is that it's not a scam. Well, not entirely.
I will stay for you. Could you stay for me? Everybody deserves to be free.
I want to introduce Nick. He is currently the COO at Fund for Guaranteed Income, where he examines AI's impact on low-income communities. He leads a community working group to discuss AI's potential impact, the AI knowledge gap, and how we can guide future AI design and deployment. Really important. His career explores using technology to support economic and racial justice. At Fund for Guaranteed Income, he leads strategy, product development, and operations, and has implemented more than 15 pilot programs. Previously, he designed large-scale tech systems in East Africa and collaborated with organizations like FII and Kiva, holds a BA in political science from Stanford University. So, Nick, welcome to the FreeHer Podcast. Thank you for agreeing to come on and deal with all of us as a novice in this space, freaked out a lot and trying to figure out how can we begin to embrace AI in a way that helps us to advance our work and doesn't just leave us on the table to be picked apart.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Andrea, for that introduction. And I'm really excited to be here and to have this conversation. I think it's the right time.
Yeah, so let's dive right in. We want to just ask first, Nick, what is AI?
Yeah, I think that this is a great question. And I'll start by saying that a lot of this I'm learning as well. And so I'm excited to chat through this and see where else that we could learn together. When I hear AI, at least a month ago, what I think about is the Terminator, right? Or Jarvis from Iron Man. These systems that kind of speak to you and they can do anything you ask them. And right now, AI is not really like that. When we talk about AI, what we're talking about are very powerful tools, and they're called right now language models. And these tools basically read the entire internet, all the books, help articles, forums, DIY videos out there, and we're able to understand patterns at a really deep level. So initially, kind of more like an advanced autocomplete, where you can type something in and it completes the pattern for you. And now they're capable of a lot more today.
Well, when you say something like there is now technology that exists that has the capacity to read the entire internet, like what? That's mind-boggling. How does all of this information get culled in so that a tool like this can read it?
It's such an interesting question in the process, I think, for training these models on the entire internet. I'm sure that they used every trick in the book. Some things like text are easier. You could imagine just feeding in books so that these models could read these books. My understanding is it's a combination both of having access to the data, getting it sometimes in ways that maybe these companies weren't authorized to do. And there's ongoing debate about the ethics around that. A lot of creativity and artists are, understandably upset that these models were trained on their art, which they put on the internet. And now these models are able to replicate that art style. It was accessing the data, and then it was also some technological innovations that allowed these models to get better at understanding connections. And so when they took in these articles, initially they could read them, but they couldn't really understand patterns beyond very simple ones. And then they improved the technology so that they're actually able to understand these really, really deep connections from books and articles and all kinds of things across the internet, and then find these patterns from them.
And what you're talking about also is also the intellectual property issues that are coming up as a result of this information that they're just kind of plowing in to extract the information from. So if you have people who have intellectual property rights or copyrights, or, they wrote a book, or, they didn't necessarily give permission for their book to be used in this way. I guess those are parts of some of the pushback that's happening, or discussions that are going on around how this information is being gathered. With that said, I can't, before we go further into specifically these questions about AI, I can't help but ask Nick, what are we worrying about with Doge? I mean, they're apparently getting access to a lot of information about us as individuals. And is this part of the building out of AI?
I think that there's a lot of concern with the amount of information and the lack of oversight and transparency that is happening right now. Both with Doge, and then there are talks about companies like Palantir that are working to compile information from lots of different sources. Tech companies already have so much information about us, and combining that with what the government has on their side, I think people are right to be worried. As far as how it relates to AI, there is a question about how these models, as they get more and more powerful, could use that data set to do specific things like increase surveillance around people. But as far as these models, when we talk about the development of AI, I think what's going on politically is almost on a parallel track. These models are moving forward. And then when we think about Doge, or we think about, creating a database of all the information about Americans, for example, that is an example of a bad use case, a kind of direction that AI is going that we want to steer away from.
It's not a scam then. I mean, there's people who are novices like us, or just people who are on social media constantly, and there's this side conversation that's happening that's saying, oh, this is just a scam.
For me, I really understand that perspective. And I want to start by saying that I was totally in this camp at first. I think that I am just generally very skeptical of big claims that technology is going to come along and make our life all better, solve all the problems. Because we've seen time and time again, and I don't need to tell you, but that's not really what happens. It changes a lot, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse, but it's never this magical elixir that's going to fix everything. My current stance right now is that it's not a scam. Well, not entirely. I think that what you see is that a lot about how AI is being talked about right now, especially by CEOs, they're talking about it so that it looks really impressive, right, and game-changing. And at the same time, what you and I are seeing AI appear in our daily lives is summarize my text messages. Right? That's the joke. If the text message needs to be summarized, it's probably too long to begin with, right? So AI is being put in front of people in all these kinds of ways that no one's asking for and no one wants. So there's that. There's a combination of also, again, tech CEOs wanting to say and make a lot of promises because it looks great for their investors. Stock price goes up, they get more money. And then all of this is coming, I think, on the wave of a time in which people encountered a lot of scams in their life. So when you think about COVID overlapped with a period of just tons of scams. I mean, you probably get 10 text messages a week. And a lot of that had to related to cryptocurrency. cryptocurrency, another kind of technological product that had a lot of evangelists that said, oh, this is going to transform money, it's going to transform banking. And yet 90% of what people engage with in that space ended up being a lot of scams. So there's this combination of people's real lived experience when it comes to how technology has impacted their life. And I think a lot of timing and recent historical context that makes it feel like a scam. But again, it's such a huge space and transformation that even a lot of this that feels scammy has tremendous value. And I think it's really worth paying attention to right now.
And it's quick too. I mean, this stuff is coming at us like lightning fast and changing every day. And like you said, in our everyday lives that, you're just trying to send a text message to someone. And in our everyday lives now, we get these pop-ups that are saying, let us help you make it better. Well, it's four sentences. It's why we're trying to figure this out. And also because, like I said in the beginning of our discussion, our talk here, Nick, technology has been used in our ecosystem that is made up of and led by incarcerated and formerly incarcerated people. These models of technology have not really been used to help us advance a different way of doing things other than the controlling and oppressive ways of prisons and the apparatus, the tools that, hold us or control our movements or, make it so that the prison walls go far past the gate of the prison. It's going so fast. How is AI going to affect us over the next few years? Where are we going?
It is moving really fast. And I have a lot of friends that work in this space, and the things that they tell me in terms of just all of the work that's happening. I mean, even being on the inside, I think it feels fast. And then you can imagine like you and I being a step removed, and the pace is just unbelievable. So first off, yes, it's moving really quickly. I think when we think about how will AI impact our lives in the next few years, I think about it a lot like the coming of the next internet. Folks older than me have a better memory of time before the internet, right? Time before cell phones, how things were back then, exactly, and then how different things are now. And when you look at it today, most people don't think really the internet is good or bad. It's almost just like a force of nature. You encountered it everywhere you go. But in the very beginning, people had all kinds of opinions about the internet. Some people were intrigued. Some people said this is going to ruin everything. What it came along and did is really connect. Social media, I think, is like the most obvious example of this, connecting people. But it also really made things that were already happening happen more efficiently. So when you think about getting a ride from point A to point B, instead of going out, trying to hail a cab or something, calling a local service, now you can get a ride with Uber, just a tap of a button. Same with buying plane flights. If you wanted to set up a trip, you could go into a travel agent's office and actually talk with them, or get on the phone with an airline and purchase tickets. Now you can do it online, takes you less than 2 minutes. So the internet was about really connection and about helping things that were already happening happen more efficiently. And I think that the major difference with AI is that it is really a deeper level of transformation. So it's going to enable us to do things pretty fundamentally differently. And with that comes a lot of other shifts in our relationship to work.
I love that example. That was really helped us to think more clearly about what this is in making the comparison to the coming of the internet. But there's also a dark web. There's a dark web, and there's all kinds of nefarious things that are going on in the dark web. The scams are there, and lots of other really scary things. And I think AI, at the pace it's moving, I think that was the difference with the onboarding of the internet. from the dial-up startup sound. Older people like me will remember with AOL, you've got mail, to where it is now. But also, the AI onboarding is happening so fast, and that millions of people still don't really understand it, albeit they're using it without maybe even identifying that this is actually AI at being used. My youngest child is 15 and he is a whiz at anything technology. How do you have a clue? In my generation or other parents, how do you stay on top of this? And what are some of the ways that we can think about AI so that we're not just paralyzed into not engaging?
So AI is moving, as you said, so fast, and it is tempting for a lot of reasons to say, I'm going to just sit this one out, see what happens. And I really think that there are a lot of great reasons to try to be more engaged right now. One is that, just like anything, getting more experience with tools, even if these are tools that are changing quickly, is going to be helpful, because you can start to practice using them and start to even just think on your day-to-day, how might I use this tool in the future? What am I excited about? What am I worried about? I think that another thing that I'm really excited about right now is that even though AI is moving quickly, the future of where it's going to go is not set in stone. This is not written down. It's not already determined. And so while we are in this period of just rapid change, I really believe there's a window where people like you and me can actually help to guide the direction and have our voices be heard in terms of saying, this is how I want it to look. I want it to be for people. I don't want it to exhibit bias, and I don't want it to, let's say, replace a lot of the things about life that make us human. So yes, it is a time of rapid change, and that can feel a bit intimidating. But for me, it's also a time of, for me, it's also a time where the people who are actually making AI are open to listening and saying, this is where we want it to go.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because when we talk about practicing with the tools and so forth, still there's a lot of people, the majority of the public, who just wouldn't even know where to begin. But who are these people when you say that they're still, what are the entities that are still willing to listen in regard to, what folks are saying or trying to make a contribution to around AI? Like, what are those entities?
So when we talk about AI, a lot of times people think about what they have seen in movies. So you might think about AI in Iron Man, which is Jarvis, that little talking voice in his helmet, or in Terminator. And right now, what AI looks like are very powerful tools called language models. And these tools have essentially read the entire internet and gotten really good at understanding the patterns that you see. And patterns are everywhere. They are how you and I think, is recognizing patterns. And so it's a very powerful thing that they have learned to understand these patterns at a deep level. One thing about these models is, at least at the moment, they can't really learn new skills. So they are mostly applying patterns they've seen elsewhere to create and answer questions. One example, I recently asked a model, can you help me to write a letter to my landlord asking him to not increase the rent as much, right? This is not a new skill. There are plenty of examples out there of people talking about how to do this. And so the model was able to write that letter for me.
Listeners, take note. That's a good example. You can ask one of these models how to do that.
Yeah, we're still waiting on the response from that. So we'll see how effective it is. But yes, these models, something to know about them, while they're extremely powerful, they can't really learn new skills yet. There's a lot of open questions about, do they really understand what they are doing when they create for us? Do they think like you and I do?
Give me a name. Give me a couple of names of some of these models.
The model that most people have heard of right now is something called ChatGPT. And ChatGPT is made by a company called OpenAI. And they are the model that I think gets the most like news coverage, kind of like when we talk about an app for rideshare. There are a lot out there, but Uber and Lyft are kind of the big names that float around. So OpenAI is the company, ChatGPT is the model they make, but there are now many of these models. And just to list another two of the larger ones, there's a model called Claude, which is made by a company called Anthropic. And then Google, which is by now a household name. Even if you're not on the internet, you probably heard of Google. And they make a model called Gemini. So there's many of these models coming out. Some of them are better at some things. Some of them are better at others. Like ChatGPT right now is very good at like chats, like almost like customer service chats. The models tend to be really good at certain tasks like math and computer science, like writing code, compared to just being generally great at everything.
So how would we, make a contribution to the future of AI? If we are just part of a beautiful, vast network of all sorts of individuals, organizations, entities that work in a space that we refer to as, abolition, prison abolition, criminal justice reform, however you want to shape that issue, two very different postures in that space, but of that ecosystem. If we wanted to not walk in fear of AI, even though we still don't know a lot and know that we don't want it to just be used against us, what are some of the things that as organizations in this ecosystem can do, and individuals, to begin again to understand better, just you explaining the major models of this ChatGPT, owned by OpenAI, Claude, Google, Gemini. I've of course heard of Google forever, and now increasingly heard of Gemini. But until you just taught us that, I had no idea that that's Google's AI version. And so, what are some other things that we can do to help us by embracing AI in ways that will continue to help us advance our work?
In order to help steer AI as a field, I think actually traditional organizing is a great response. And what I mean by that is coming together in order to articulate a vision that says this is the part of the future of AI that represents the communities that I'm a part of and the people whose interests that I want to see represented at that table. Because a lot of folks, especially in the coming months, are going to have more and more of a critique of AI. And there's lots of things to critique about. Environmental issues, privacy issues, we can get into all of that. But fewer people, I think, are going to have a positive vision of where they want to see these tools go. And I think that that is really important and something that organizations like the Council and many others are actually really well suited to do. Because working on the types of issues, abolitionist issues like you do, requires you to have a vision beyond what you see in front of you. I think too, also because right now the AI space, these companies, it's very competitive. My sense is that they are sensitive to pressure. And so if we're able to articulate, hey, this is the vision where we want to see AI go, then we can begin to say which companies are doing this and which are not. Can we give them a grade? Can we hold them accountable? And then can begin to articulate, just like you do with companies out there, right? Companies that might be supporting the prison industrial complex. Mm-hmm. Say, one, we want to bring attention to the fact that these companies are not operating in good faith, and then publicize that. make it harder for them to raise money, make it less attractive for investors to be a part of their work.
I love how you frame that by bringing us back to the roots of the grassroots organizing model. It all goes back to that, to just use the traditional methods that we've used, albeit we have more technology to engage with around those things. But, we all can see clearly what social media has done in terms of organizing and getting the word out. Going back to those traditional ways of thinking about coming together, still coming in person, sitting together, grappling over these issues, and then figuring out how do we engage. And then when we do start to feel that there are companies that are producing information that is against or antithematic to what the narratives that we're trying to shift, that we could know that, we can call on these companies to stop those practices. You brought up something, Nick, that I think I should have asked a little earlier in our discussion, but I don't want to leave us here without bringing it up. And that is about, where is all this information being stored? I mean, this is a massive, you can't even wrap your head around this. But I'll give you an example of what a layman person like myself could think about. You look at Amazon, and how they operate. And then they have these massive, massive places where they are gathering information. And so what is that like for gathering the information that's in all of this AI stuff? Where is it going and who's holding on to it?
A lot of the data, to my knowledge, is being stored in these massive data centers that companies are building. And oftentimes these data centers are built essentially in places where they don't have to be as concerned with the neighbors. And that doesn't mean that there aren't people there, but there are lower income communities, for example, that are where data centers are being built, similar to where, historically they have built power plants, where they have built waste treatment facilities. Because of that, the environmental impacts and the health impacts of living next to a data center, I think, I don't know very much about, but I know this is an area that people are concerned with.
Yeah, we are too. And just in a little bit of research we've done about that also, just finding out where these places are and then paying attention environmentally, which is what you mentioned the environment a little while ago, and it made me think of this question. Environmentally, what is this doing, in terms of, the resources, the electricity, the natural resources, the water, to build a facility that could house all of this data collection?
There are two things I'd like to mention as we wrap up here. One, this idea, is AI only for tech people? And how do you use it? And I think for me, the reason this is so important, we were just talking about how do we steer the future of AI? And something essential to that is needing to be able to talk about it. If we can't talk about it, we can't make our voices heard. And so understanding, even at the base level, what does these tools look like? How do I access them? How expensive are they? AI is not just for tech people right now, and it actually doesn't require any technical skills at all. And this is one thing that really differentiates it from other technology that has come in the past. When they were building websites or building web apps, you really needed technical skill in order to be able to do this. But with AI, if you can type a question, you can use it. So another thing to talk about AI is that it's free right now. It just requires a web connection. You can access it from your computer, from your cell phone. And folks use it for all kinds of things. Drafting emails, like I mentioned to my landlord earlier, doing some research, problem solving, and even learning. Learning, I found it really helpful as I learn about AI to use some of these tools to help me just get a bird's eye view of topics that I don't understand. When I approach a problem and I'm like, I don't even know where to start with this, having a tool that's actually read everything out there is really helpful.
Don't be afraid is what I want to say to our listeners. Lots of our listeners aren't afraid. Lots of them are just been diving in. Our membership is vast and deep. We have people who are old heads like myself, and we have some really incredible young people, our youth leaders, our young folks around the country who are really earnestly coming up with some of the most brilliant ways of decarceration, of stopping the use of prisons and jails in this country, of figuring out how do we end incarceration of women and girls and everyone else, and really come out with the decades-long research and pilot projects that we've conducted to figure out how to do this. And so, Nick, this is going to be an ongoing conversation. I hope you will consider yourself part of the FreeHer Podcast family around the AI issue and really helping us to connect it as your research grows, as our interest in this grows as well, and as we begin to practice with these tools.
I really believe the future is being written right now, and we have this window to participate. And that window isn't going to be open forever. There are companies out there, there are individual people at those companies that are thinking about the same questions that you and I have about how are these tools going to impact the lives of real people going forward. And that is where I really want to ground my understanding of these tools, right, is around people. How do they help people? How can we have them make people better, augment what we're able to do as people instead of replace? I think that there's an element to understanding what are the kinds of use cases where AI models could be biased and where we need to really push back against them being implemented, things like predictive policing, risk assessment, granting parole. As people, we do need to familiarize ourselves with these tools because it's hard to articulate a vision for where we want them to go if we're not even able to talk about them. And I know that as much as anybody, right? You know what you want to say, but you don't know how to say it. And so just, again, getting a little bit of familiarity with it, I think is very helpful. There are projects like the Collective Intelligence Project, which did a whole project around how do we train AI models using a constitution. And so you could imagine that, they encourage different groups to write their own constitution, and then you can train a model on that. And just for a second, imagining, right, if you could write a constitution that guided how these models make decisions, what would you want to put in there?
Wow, that is an exciting proposition that I think we're going to have to explore a little bit of. And maybe, Nick, you can help us to connect with this group to do a deeper dive around that conversation. I think that's a really exciting project that folks in our ecosystem can do. And writing our own constitutions and also writing what we envision, which is so hard for us as abolitionists. It's not hard for us. It's hard for us, like you said, to find the language. We learned early on in just saying, well, we're going to end incarceration of women and girls. Well, you have to do a lot of raising public awareness in order to have people begin to grasp that and understand that, yeah, this is way more doable than what the traditional narratives around the criminal law system allow us to think about. So I want to say thank you, Nick. I could talk to you about this all day long, and I want to really circle back with you as we dive deeper into this, maybe have another conversation with you and that group that you just spoke about, because I think that those are the kinds of projects that can really help within our ecosystem to move us further along and helping to raise that public awareness, to shift public opinion. What you said, and it's so key, and why we continue to love and partner with you, Nick, because you care about the everyday people. We can talk about these issues all day long from a position that really doesn't get down to the nuts and bolts about, okay, that's all good, but how is it affecting everyday people, and particularly the people who are most entangled, from our perspective, in these carceral systems. So thank you, Nick, again. We look forward to talking to you real soon. And please keep up your research.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Andrea, for having me on.